Okay, thanks everyone for coming along to the Ladies Be Architects virtual scholarship program launch. I'm really excited to be talking to you today about this new program we just launched a few weeks ago. With me, I have Nadina. She's one of our ambassadors, an incredible woman, CTA from 2022, and she got the golden hoodie at the Architect keynote at Dreamforce just gone. Nadina, did you want to say hello?
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much for joining. So we have a pretty straightforward agenda for you. I'll be talking a little bit about how this program has come about. So the history of Ladies Be Architects from way back in 2017 when we were started by Gemma, and how we've evolved over the last 6 years, and kind of looking to what's the future for Ladies Be Architects. Nadine is going to share a little bit about her journey to CTA. She did self-fund all of that. So this is exactly the kind of example of a person who is in an underrepresented group in Salesforce technical architecture that we want to be assisting to break down some of the barriers that are there. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what the Ladies Be Architect Scholarship is about, the eligibility factors, what assistance we're going to be able to offer you, timeframes that you can expect for application and responses and being able to start issuing that assistance, and how you can go about applying. And then I'll open the floor for questions. So let's talk a little bit about how Ladies Be Architects got started and what we have been doing for the last 6 years. So it's a volunteer group. Gemma founded the group in 2017, as I mentioned, and the goal has always been around building confidence for aspiring Salesforce architects. And we really want to move the needle on women's participation in technical architecture. Now, that's evolved in recent times because we know that gender is not a binary and there are lots of wonderful different expressions of gender that people might have. So it's not just about women anymore. We also support non-binary folks. Trans women, anyone who identifies as a woman or non-binary is welcome and eligible for this program and for any of the support that we offer. At the same time, we don't block men from participating. Our study groups are out there on YouTube for anyone to view. We always open up our registrations for anyone to come along, but we want to amplify these voices of underrepresented people in technical architecture. So Gemma founded us. She's based over in the UK. And at the time, she was starting on her own journey to CTA. So she was looking around and seeing what support groups are there, who else is on this pathway that I can buddy up with and work together on this journey. We did a bit of a survey at that time and found that roughly 4% of CTAs were women. The Salesforce Architect Pyramid, where it's broken down the pathway to CTA into the separate domains, had been introduced, but it was still relatively new. I think it had come out in the same year. And there wasn't much of a Salesforce Architect community as yet. I know today that we've got things like the Architect Ohana, we've got architect community groups popping up around the world. There's the architect relations team at Salesforce. But back then, it really wasn't the same kind of landscape. And study resources were also scarce because the architect pyramid and those domains were relatively new. I think Salesforce themselves, who had their own internal study groups and had been studying the domains, had a lot of resources internally, but out in the community, it was scarce. Gemma's not one to just sit around when she sees that something out there is missing or that she'd want to change. So she started Ladies Be Architects to really combat all of these challenges that she was having. So now we have a lot more people who are directors, ambassadors, leaders. So fast forward to 2023, you can see all of the faces down there below. We've got Melissa Shepherd on the left and Nadina, who's on this call today, as our newer ambassadors. Adrian, who's on the call with me as well, one of our directors based in Australia. We've got some of the originals, Charlie, obviously Gemma herself, and Susanna, who's now part of the architect relations team. Another one of our directors, Vicky, who's also based in Australia, and then myself, Emily. We've done another bit of a review of the number of CTAs. Now, it is kind of hard to get the accurate stats. I don't think that anyone is actually formally collecting credential status and gender as a data set. But with the surveys and the knowledge that we have, we're estimating that about 6% of CTAs are now women. That's grown, which is fantastic, but there's still obviously some work to do. Study resources are much more plentiful today than they were 6 years ago. So there's the Well Architected framework that's available from the Architect Relations team, which is an incredible resource, not just for study, but just to be a great architect in your day-to-day. There is the Architect Ohana that Melissa has founded, where people are buddying up and creating study groups of people who are at a similar point in their journey so that you can study together. There are tons of videos that I find on YouTube. We've created a lot, but there's also Apex Hours have some amazing videos. Johan has his own channel where he's shared a few of his coaching videos. And the architect community is really thriving. There are so many people coming along to these architect sessions and workshops at the Salesforce run events like World Tours and Dreamforce. There's so many more people who are identifying themselves as architects or aspiring architects. There are groups and there are communities all over the place. But we know there's still work to be done. Like I mentioned, 6%, that's not much. And I know there are a lot of women out there who are capable and would really get a lot out of working in Salesforce architecture like I do. It's a career that I really love. So I was thinking and talking to my fellow leadership team at Ladies Be Architects about what's left. The barriers that we were first looking at are things like access to study and community. There are still obviously barriers in the way, otherwise there would be more equity. I think that they can be categorized into two main pillars, one being social. So that's things like your own self-belief and confidence, the bias that we still face in the workplace, whether that's unconscious or just straight up blatant bias. And women's role tending towards being a primary carer in families, whether that's for people who are unwell, elderly family members, or children, which often means that you need to take on part-time work. You have other commitments. And I find, certainly it was true for me, the time in your career when you really got enough experience that you can start thinking and getting serious about pursuing architect credentials or an architect career or even the CTA, you have to have a bit of experience under your belt. And it came for me exactly when I was settling down and starting a family. So my first CTA attempt, I was actually very heavily pregnant. I failed that one, but wanted to try and get an attempt in before I had a baby, which delayed my journey by a couple of years, but I managed to pick it up again. The financial barrier is the other one. So not everyone works for employers like consulting partners or Salesforce themselves who have the ability and the, I guess, encouragement or motivation to fund study and certifications for their staff. And that consulting career, which is really where you get a lot of support to grow and to learn, really isn't that suitable for a lot of primary carers because of the time commitment and the demanding nature of consulting work. We also know that there are global impacts, like being in countries that have a lower GDP or a poorer exchange rate against the US dollar, like India, Brazil, Philippines. There are a lot of countries where we have some really talented people in the Salesforce world who, you know, a $400 certification is immensely expensive once you convert that into their local currency. So we want to keep working to break down these barriers. On the social side, the things that we try and do, and we're going to keep trying to do, are all about creating inspiration and motivation through providing role models, highlighting people who are women or non-binary who are succeeding in Salesforce architecture, providing the support and mentoring for people who are wanting to pursue this career, and promoting women and non-binary voices in Salesforce architecture. So that's going to keep happening. On the financial side, this is where we're looking at the scholarship program to help. So we want to provide access to study and certifications in the Salesforce architecture space, targeted towards those women and non-binary folks who are at a mid to senior level. It's really hard to draw a hard line on how many years experience do you get called a mid-level. We've put it at 3. It's a real ballpark, just based on our, I guess, knowledge of people in the community, and our own careers. We also are not supporting employees of consulting partners or Salesforce, that should say there as well, at this time. Because of the partner program and because of Salesforce's own internal, I guess, motivations, they have real financial benefit from educating and credentialing their staff. So we're going to look at the people who don't have that kind of help. So you might be an employee of a nonprofit or an education institute, or any kind of Salesforce customer that just doesn't really understand the benefit of having staff that are more highly educated and credentialed in the Salesforce space. Or perhaps you're self-employed, and you're just contracting, and then of course the employer who holds that contract is unlikely to give you that extra support. Or maybe you're unemployed. There are a lot of people who've been faced with layoffs recently, and we want to help them too. So I'm going to hand over now to Nadina. She's going to talk a little bit about her journey to CTA. Over to you, Nadina.
Thank you so much, Emily. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yes, so this overall is my 2-year journey. So I wanted to start and stay on this slide just so we could get an idea of when I started and how long it was. So it was about 2 years. And in that 2 years, there was a lot that happened. And so when I first started thinking about CTA, it was right before COVID. And it was around a time where, there's a lot of uncertainty with what was going on with COVID, and the world had just gotten locked down. And that was when I had the idea of, this is a great time for me to study, and really focus in and looking at my journey. One of the first things I did was I was very excited, and I went to my employer to ask about, how would you be able to support me on this journey? I'd done a lot of research. I knew it was very time intensive. I didn't know how much time at the time, but I knew it was something that I wanted to proceed with, and also that it would be quite expensive. To my dismay, I did a whole presentation, explained the cost benefit, all the things. And, I was met with this isn't the right time for us right now, wait until next year. And I really had to think about, well, do I continue on with the journey? Do I wait until next year? So what I did was I worked on my prerequisites. So I started looking at, finishing up my application architecture. I'd just gotten my sharing and my data. And so I really was just working now on my system, and I was working on my identity. So I got my data and my sharing in March. Those were 2 beta exams that I happened to pass. And that gave me my application architecture. And then in August, I finished up my system, my identity, which gave me my system. So I had my prerequisites. I remember going to the 601 class. At the time, it was optional. It was something I said, okay, well, if I wait for my employer, I probably will be waiting for about a year. So at the time, I was like, okay, let's just do the cost analysis. It wasn't too expensive at the time. So I said, okay, let me pay for this and see really what the CTA is about and preparing for the CTA. Within those 3 days, it was virtual. It was very eye-opening because, one, a lot of people had talked about doing mocks. A lot of people had talked about having mentors. And I felt a bit behind because I was like, this is supposed to be the first class to learn about what you should know about CTA. So immediately when that class was done, I said, okay, I really need to put things into gear and make that decision that if I wait for my employer to sponsor me or to give me the funds, I'm going to be slowing myself down while I have the momentum. So I made the decision that Friday to put in my case. I was on the Trailblazer community asking for mentors, and I did get a mentor, which was great. It was Lawrence Newcomb. But I knew that as a customer, I wasn't exposed to a lot of what a lot of consultants would be exposed to. So a lot of different projects. I had different problems to solve, but they weren't at the, let's say, enterprise level, or they weren't as vast as most consultants would see, because you would see a lot of different projects within different industries. And so that's around the time where I was thinking about enrolling in Flow Republic. So I joined Flow Republic hoping to meet like-minded people. And I had my study group, and we studied very intensely. So we'd study every day. And it was something where, as we were going through it, as we were spending the time, we were really focused in on learning our fundamentals, learning what we didn't know. There was a lot we didn't know, and unlearning things that we thought that we had known. So things like limits that we were so sure that were like not at all in the ballpark. And so that was intense. It was really intense. And by the time November had rolled around and I was doing my board evaluation, I was a little bit worried at the time, because one, it was like, if I didn't pass my board evaluation, I was already paying for this, but there is also a 6-month wait that you have to wait if you don't pass that evaluation. So on one hand, I was getting a bit burnt out, actually, because I'd been studying so intensely. And on the other hand, I was wanting to keep the momentum. I didn't want to stop. So I said, whatever happens, happens. I'm going to take the evaluation. And if I have to take a break, then I have to take a break. That's fine. But I didn't want to get in my way of essentially discounting myself. So when I passed the evaluation in November, I was very excited. And I remember when I got the date, I was a bit worried. And I wasn't worried because of my preparation. I was actually worried because I would have to take off some significant time at work. And it was already hard getting the study time at work, even though it was something I'd tried to negotiate, since you're not paying for my certs and the exam and the process, let me have some time at work. So that was a bit difficult of a time, but I still took the time off. I went to do the boards in February. I felt really good about the take. It was amazing. And it was an amazing day. I tell everybody it was like one of the best days. And then I got my results and I had failed. And it was something where I was very shocked, because the feeling did not match how I felt about the results. And I think that's how sometimes we all feel about, when we go and take these exams. Sometimes you feel really good and then you don't get the results that you were hoping for. So I continued to study, and I got another date in June, and I went and I got a partial pass. And that was really frightening for me, because at that point, I was like, full exam felt really intense. Having to now drill down and do data and solution, and going into the depth that you have to go for a 2-section retake, and passing on a 2-section retake is a very small percentage at the time. There weren't many people at the time who had passed with my sections. It was a bit daunting. But one of the things I decided was, now that I am in this, I called it my stable situation. This is June 2022. I made a lot of changes. So that summer, I moved, I switched jobs. And it was just one of those things where I've been waiting to see when I would get a stable position or stable in my CTA journey, because I didn't want anything to affect it. So at that point, I was not liking my job, and we wanted to move, but it, was COVID, and we didn't want to do a COVID move. And so it just felt right when I had my partial pass. And I remember that summer, it was a very interesting summer, because everyone was like, you're doing what? You're moving, you switch jobs. Why don't you wait until after you finish? But for me, CTA had been my whole world from 2020 to 2022. And so it was one of those things where it just felt right. And instinctually, it didn't matter if I was still at that job, or it didn't matter if I was still in that state. It was one of those things where I was at a stable point, and this was a, let's say, milestone in my CTA journey where I wanted to make sure that my last leg I was rested, because again, doing a 2-section retake is not for the it's not it's something where you have to study a lot more and a lot more intensely, because it's not the same as studying for all the sections. You really have to know those 2 sections because you're going to be grilled specifically on that. And so that summer, I moved, I switched jobs, everything was new. I think I even went to Dreamforce that year, was very interesting. And when I finally got my date, I had the option to either do it in person or to do it virtually. And I opted to do it in person. So I went up to New York, and it was interesting because it felt, again, another great day. And I was kind of a little worried actually, because I kept having these great days after board passes, but with each step I was getting incrementally better. But I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And so I remember when I got my results, I was so excited and I was so happy. And I was really happy that I had taken the time to invest in myself and that I had the ability to invest in myself. And it was one of those things where if I had waited on my company, I think I'd still be waiting for them. I think I'd still be waiting for them to say, you know, we have the funds now. Because again, working for a customer, it's a little difficult, especially for, like, I would say, smaller customers, to explain to them that the importance of CTA, or why having the CTA or having a CTA in-house is important. But it was one of those things where I'm glad that I was able to invest in myself, glad that the journey is done, and now I get to help other people along on their journey. And so throughout the 2 years, it was a definitely whirlwind experience, but something that if I had to do it again, I would do it the same way. And with that, Emily, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Nadina. I can hear the emotion in your voice when you talk about this, and I know how meaningful it was for you. You're so inspiring, and thank you on a personal level. Thank you for the study help that you gave me on my journey as well. So with that, let's talk about the scholarships program. So first of all, I just want to call out the sponsors that make it possible. Without the help from Odaceva, Elements Clouds, Maverick, Calibrix, cohort partners, and Talent Hub, we wouldn't be able to offer the kind of financial support that we're going to be offering to the community. So thank you so much to our sponsors for making this possible. Let's talk about eligibility first. I mentioned it just before, at least 3 years of experience in a hands-on role related to Salesforce, but that doesn't mean you have to be a developer or even a point and click admin or functional type developer. You could be a BA, a QA, a project lead or project manager type role, someone who's worked in relation to Salesforce. If you've had exposure to the development side, and I don't just mean code, of course, I mean functional development, that's going to help you further along. At some point, you will need to get that. It is technical architecture after all, but I just want to make sure that you all realize that you are capable of learning this kind of stuff. Back about maybe 4, maybe even 3 years ago, I used to say, oh, you know, maybe I can be a solution architect, but I'll never be technical enough. I'm not technical enough, that kind of thing. And now I'm a CTA. I really found, looking back, that learning all of the surrounding things that make you a great architect, like communication, presentation, negotiation, and influence, that kind of thing, was that's much harder to get a grasp on than the technical side. I'm not saying the technical side is easy, but it's fairly simple, if that makes sense. Here is the facts. Go away and learn them. Get hands-on with them, that kind of thing. You are very capable of doing that. But yes, we are looking for people who've had some experience. There are definitely programs that already exist to help the people who are more early in their journey. And we have some partnerships with some of them as well, like Amplify. We're going to be sharing candidates with Rad Women Code And there are programs like Scale Up Architects who are also helping at that kind of earlier architect level. Currently not employed by Salesforce or a Salesforce consulting / systems integrator partner company. Potentially you might be working for a Salesforce ISV partner. That tends to be people who've got apps that are built on or connected to the Salesforce platform and that advertise on the App Exchange. We're open to those people because the partner program for ISVs is different to the systems integrator partner program. You'd be someone who's looking to become or improve your skills and credibility as a Salesforce architect. So that's really our focus. So it's largely around the pyramids, but also potentially the surrounding aspects of being a great architect. And you're facing financial barriers, whether that's because you are a single parent, you've just got struggles with the cost of living, you're living somewhere with a poor exchange rate to the US dollar. There can be so many reasons that it's hard to pay for the study and the credentialing. We're here to help you regardless of what those kind of barriers that you're facing are. So the assistance that is available, we really want to work with you. So part of the program, the process of application and then being awarded a scholarship is that we'll do an interview where we'll talk to you a little bit about where you're at, what your endpoint or your long-term goal is, how ready and how committed you can be. And that might be because of other commitments that you've got, like caring, that kind of thing, but you need to take it at a certain pace that someone else might need to do a different pace. That's okay. We want to figure out how we can help you in your individual situation. So we'll help break down the big goals into bite-sized chunks and just take it one step at a time. So that might mean an architect cert voucher. It might mean Trailhead Academy courses. It might even mean that you're ready for a CTA study program, or you need to have some of those prerequisites that Nadina went through funded for you. And also mentorship and support. So it's not just financial. We want to make sure we're surrounding you with encouragement. This can be a long, arduous journey, but it's so much better when you're doing it with other people and you're getting encouragement from people who've been there and have been through the pit of despair, I'll call it, and come out the other side. We've got applications open now, so I'll be linking you through to the form in a moment. Feel free to apply now. We do have the ability to save your application for later if you want to mull it over a little bit longer before coming back and completing it. We're committing to responding an invitation to interview within 4 to 6 weeks of your application. And with our sponsorship agreements, we should be receiving funds by the end of this year and starting to disperse those vouchers and access to funded courses from January 2024. So here's how to apply. Now, if you go to our website, justladiesbearchitects.com, the first post on the front page at the moment is the scholarships post. So that will link you to our main scholarships page, which is ladiesbearchitects.com/scholarships. But that pretty much tells you what I've just told you today. So you can go straight to scholarship-application, and that will take you to the application form itself, where you can start putting in your details. If you have any problems when you're trying to submit your application, you have any more personal questions, please email us at hello@ladiesbearchitects.com. And maybe you've learned today a bit more about the program and realize that right now you're not eligible, but I really encourage you to please spread the word. We want to have as much impact as possible in our first year so that we can try and grow this program. So there are underrepresented groups all over the place that we could be helping, and I would love to expand this program further beyond what our current eligibility is. This isn't my last slide, but this is where I'll say thank you for listening to myself and Nadina. And do you have any questions? If anyone wants to pop something, I think there have been some comments coming into the Q&A, which is amazing. Thank you. I too am incredibly inspired by Nadina. But if anyone wants to raise their hand or wants to ask a question. Courtney, is there a date that the applications close? At this stage, no. I think we're just going to keep it always open. But this is the first time we've run this program, so I don't know how it's going to go. We'll keep it open, and if we are looking like we're going to run out of budget for 2024, we'll communicate that as early as possible to let people know that there will be a date that will close it. For now, I just encourage you to get in and apply, because even if you're not ready right away, we're happy to keep your application sitting in kind of a warm place. We can come back to it when you are ready. Someone has asked, is this just for CTA or for SA? I think SA probably means solution architect. It's not just for CTA or solution architect, but we really are focused on the architect space in Salesforce. So that might mean that you are ready to do your PD1 or your platform app builder, or perhaps experienced cloud consultant. Those are all part of the architect journey. You might want to get a few choice certificates, or just do even some training and not get certified, that are in the architect space, but then hop off the ride. You don't want to go all the way to CTA, and that is totally fine. Everyone's at a different place and wants different things from their career. I hope that has answered your question. Sybil, so how long is the program start to end 1-year commitments? So we're going to be chunking down. You might have a goal of eventually becoming a CTA, but you still need to achieve some of the architect pyramids. So we'll worked with you to figure out what is the next best goal for you. Perhaps it's one single certification. We'll help support you to get that certification if you're eligible for the program, and we'll set a time frame that's reasonable for you around that. So someone might be super ready, have already done a bunch of study, and just really needs a cert voucher, and they can take that within a couple of weeks. So their commitment would be a couple of weeks. Someone else might need a few months to go through that. It'll just really be circumstantial. The selection criteria. So really, if I just come back to, it's mostly about eligibility and how we can work with you to identify your readiness and commitment and what the next goal is. So long as you have some experience in a hands-on role, even peripheral to Salesforce, you're not employed by a consulting partner or by Salesforce directly, you've got some goals in the Salesforce architect space, and you're finding that you're not able to fund this yourself or via your employer, and that you can work with us to figure out a SMART goal. So something that's going to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, I think is the R, and then time bound. So we'll help you to figure out what that is. And then i.e. 1 year or more. Yeah, so if you're going on the full CTA program, Sybil, then it's probably going to be more than a 1-year journey, depending on where you're starting from. But we'll help you chunk it down. And then if you achieve the first one, then let's look at helping you with the second one and just progressively knocking down all those goals as we go. Mandatorily putting in a certain number of hours every day or week, for example. So this is really based on how you are going to study. We want to help you to achieve these goals. We're not going to be doing the hands-on training, and we're not going to be asking you to check in and prove that you are doing the study. But if we provide you a scholarship for a goal, and then it's something that you just sort of forget about or don't take advantage of, would be unlikely to continue to support you in your journey, if that makes sense. So it's really going to be whatever number of hours that you want to and can commit to achieving your own goal, because this is really about you. This is about pushing yourself to achieve those heights that you're dreaming of achieving. So I think that's been answered. Are there any other questions? All right. I'm just going to jump to the last slide. Oh, I added it while we were talking. So let me just stop sharing and then I do this. If you are interested, I also just wanted to share about another panel that is coming up in a couple of weeks. So myself, along with Nadina, who you've heard from today, also some amazing CTAs in the ecosystem, Lilith, Manu, and Neha. We're going to be talking on the barriers that women and non-binary individuals are facing in technical architecture in a bit more depth. So you can go to, if you Google Odasiva Data Innovation Forum, this name up here, then you'll come to the page that will let you register for this. And there are scads of other really awesome sessions. Personally, the last year's Data Innovation Forum, I used to study for my CTA. They're such high quality presentations. So I do recommend having a look and seeing if there's something that interests you. All right, if that's all, then I'm going to stop sharing and I'll stop recording. And thank you so much for coming along.